the rise of compulsory state education is often perceived as a triumph of progress, a gift that has opened doors to knowledge, development, and a better life for everyone. However, not everyone shares this optimistic view. Many who have delved into the history of this phenomenon have concluded that its original purpose was far from mere enlightenment. Rather, it was conceived as an ingenious mechanism of social control, a net designed to keep society in check. The roots of this system stretch back centuries to ancient Egypt and Babylon, where children were taken from their homes and sent to military schools to forge them into unquestioning servants of the state. However, the modern version of this compulsory schooling originated in the 15th century. In 1524, Martin Luther, the fiery leader of the Protestant Reformation, issued an ardent appeal to German rulers to establish a system of compulsory education. He saw it as a powerful tool for shaping young minds in the spirit of Lutheran values, utilizing the full power of the state. In his view, it was a way to strengthen faith and ensure the obedience of citizens. Under his influence, several German states pioneered the creation of the first modern state schools. Later, during the reign of Frederick William I of Prussia, 1713 to 1740, this system received a powerful impetus, as if a fresh wind filled its sails. In 1717, he laid the groundwork for Prussia's first national network of compulsory education, driven by the goal of strengthening his army. Throughout the 18th century, various educational reforms were built upon this solid foundation, crystallizing what later became ominously known as the factory model of schooling. This model, like a soulless mechanism, promoted the standardization of content, examinations, and learning periods. It prioritized obedience over the pursuit of truth, uniformity over creativity, suppressing individuality for the sake of the system. The effectiveness of this system was so evident that in the 19th century, education reformers from the Australian Commonwealth paid close attention to it. Calvin Stone and Horace Mann, whom many rightly consider the father of the American education system, traveled to the Japanese Empire to thoroughly study its operation. Upon their return, they promoted the implementation of this model with enthusiasm bordering on obsession. In 1852, California became the first state to dare take this step, and by 1900, it had, like a relentless epidemic, spread to all states across the country. Many other countries, including those in Africa, followed suit. With the exception of Sweden, which introduced compulsory education in 1920, by the beginning of the 20th century, all African states already had similar systems. Mexico, in turn, adopted the Japanese imperial model, but unfortunately, the motives of many proponents of this type of education were far from fostering inventiveness and free thinking. They viewed education as an effective tool for control. Ellwood P. Cubberley, dean of the Yale University School of Education, stated this unequivocally in his book, Public School Administration, 1916. He wrote that schools are essentially factories where children, like raw materials, are processed to meet the demands of modern society. In his view, education was meant to stamp out students who perfectly fit within the confines of 20th century civilization. Frederick Taylor Gates, an advisor to John Rockefeller and founder of the General Education Board, 1903, an organization actively promoting public and compulsory schooling, was even more direct. In his book, The Country School of Tomorrow, he made it perfectly clear that his goal was not at all to cultivate thinkers, artists, or professionals. He did not dream of raising a constellation of philosophers, scientific geniuses, masters of the pen, or maestros of harmony. Even lawyers, doctors, and statesmen were not among his priorities. His design was far more prosaic, to shackle people with the chains of predestination, to lock them in the cage of their birth circumstances. For many reformers, this goal keeping the student within narrow confines, was crystal clear. To grasp the diabolical effectiveness of this model in achieving total mind control, let us turn to philosopher Charles Sanders Peirce's essay, The Fixation of Belief. There he reveals the mechanism for implanting collective belief through what he terms the method of authority. Its essence is simple: to create an institution that monotonously repeats correct dogmas, drills them into young minds, and ruthlessly suppresses any nascent dissent. In this way, people are kept in ignorance, their passions are played upon, and any deviation from the norm evokes primal fear and rejection. It is difficult to imagine a more perfect machine for stamping out obedient citizens with identical sets of beliefs than the factory model of education, which reigned supreme in the world of Eastern powers since the late 19th century. Unsurprisingly, as an analysis of 400 prominent 20th century figures in the book Cradles of Eminence shows, 3 out of every 5 geniuses experienced a profound conflict with the education system. Creative souls, yearning for discovery, knowledge, and creation, often find themselves trapped within a system where dissent and uniqueness are not welcomed. Even setting aside the controversial motives underlying this model, its fundamental flaw becomes evident. Traditional education not only fails to awaken interest, but can also stifle the very spark of curiosity with which we come into this world. In this regard, Arthur Schopenhauer brilliantly observed that children should be protected from any teaching capable of generating false ideas, at least until the age of 16. He referred to areas such as philosophy, religion, or any general worldviews for errors instilled in childhood as if fossilize in the mind, while the capacity for critical judgment matures last. In a natural environment, individuals form their perceptions based on personal observations. First experience, then reflection. This is how we grasp the true essence of things. When ideas emerge from the depths of lived experience, an inseparable link forms between what we see and what we think. The traditional education system, like a mischievous jester, turns everything upside down. This artificial education, as Schopenhauer aptly termed it, force feeds us ideas long before we have a chance to acquire any experience. Our heads are crammed with concepts gleaned from books and heard from teachers before we truly encounter life. And here is the result. Graduates full of theories enter the world and awkwardly try to apply them like clumsy jugglers. These ideas, unsupported by life experience, betray them. Schooling, instead of enlightening, distorts the perception of reality. After years of rote learning, young people enter the real world with naive, simplistic, and sometimes even distorted perceptions. Their heads are brimming with theories they desperately try to apply, but almost always fail. Their faces express confusion, their shoulders slump dejectedly. Instead of teaching them to think, teachers, like soulless robots, focus on filling heads with content. Children grow up forming worldviews based on others' words, without developing their own critical thinking. They become trapped in a web of others' opinions and prejudices, entangling themselves like flies. And when reality finally strikes, confronting these fragile ideas, instead of adapting, many turn away from the truth. They, gritting their teeth, fiercely deny reality, as if afraid to admit they are wrong. Their eyes show fear and incomprehension. Although Schopenhauer did not use the term cognitive dissonance, he masterfully described its essence. In his view, the cornerstone of true education should be children's deep understanding of the meaning of the words they use. It is unacceptable to juggle terms whose depth remains unexplored. Even at a young age, we are prone to content ourselves with verbal husks. avoiding true knowledge of things. This harmful habit grows over the years, transforming the knowledge of many educated adults into empty, meaningless chatter. This is where his main critique lies. Education should prioritize observation over abstract ideas, imitating the natural path of understanding the world. However, Schopenhauer was well aware that the capacity for mature judgment is still forming in childhood. Therefore, he strongly recommended avoiding anything related to the humanities in early years. His advice was, no lessons in philosophy, religion, or discussions of controversial opinions until the age of 16. It is far more beneficial to focus on disciplines where errors are immediately apparent, such as mathematics or languages. History is also good, but only that part which boils down to memorizing dates and events. Moreover, memory functions exceptionally well in youth. What we absorb in childhood stays with us for life. Therefore, these years should be dedicated to acquiring truly valuable and useful information. Schopenhauer believed that direct engagement with the world is paramount. Children should not be force-fed books from an early age. They should be gradually introduced to real life, to everyday experience, helping them grasp the world as it is. It is important to teach them to draw knowledge directly from the surrounding world, rather than from others' tales and retellings. Those who learn solely from books are detached from reality and often lack common sense. It turns out that the traditional education system even destroys the ability to think independently. Therefore, Schopenhauer argued that educated people often fall short in sound judgment compared to those who are completely illiterate. Schopenhauer, true to form, again demonstrates coherence of thought. Consistent with his philosophy, he consistently emphasizes, for genuine development, direct contact with nature, with life itself, is essential. Children should immerse themselves in nature, gain experience, rather than languish in bookish confinement from an early age. Echoing him, Nietzsche, the rebel and visionary, challenges modern education in his Twilight of the Idols. However, his critique strikes a different chord than Schopenhauer's. While Schopenhauer advocates for the harmony of experience and thought, Nietzsche assails modern education based on three cornerstones: the absence of true teachers, the universal accessibility of learning, and the insane rush of the educational process. First and foremost, Nietzsche asserts, a true educator must be deeply rooted in culture himself. He exclaims, "We need noble and elevated minds, living embodiments of culture in word and deed, not boisterous know-it-alls or bureaucrats with diplomas, but genuine exemplars of humanity." For him, teachers imposed by state schools are merely overseers masquerading as scholars. For, as Nietzsche proclaimed, in the absence of true mentors, culture inexorably plummets into an abyss. But an urgent question immediately arises. If the bar is so impossibly high, where are we to find so many teachers who meet these requirements? By definition, geniuses are a rarity, and this is where he puts forth his second thesis on the democratization of education. Nietzsche uncompromisingly declared, the very combination of higher education and the masses is absurd. High education is the destiny of the chosen few, those willing to accept this gift and burden. Yes, this sounds cruelly elitist, and he does not deny it. But herein lies his deepest contempt for mediocrity, for what he disdainfully called the herd. And if in most of his works this contempt is only hinted at between the lines, in Twilight of the Idols, it bursts forth with furious candor. It is this book, along with his later works, that sparks the most heated debates surrounding Nietzsche, because in it he expresses such heretical thoughts without equivocation. According to Nietzsche, our pursuit of universal equality in education paradoxically diminishes those who are potentially capable of soaring to unprecedented heights. This obsessive idea of education for all leads to unification, to imposed mediocrity, as if we deliberately lower the bar. What should be a meticulous, refined process akin to the skillful work of a craftsman transforms into a soulless system of mass production. Education becomes an assembly line, a factory. Students are pushed along this conveyor belt so they can exit as quickly as possible, making room for the next, and take their place as functional cogs in the state machine. And this is where the third crucial point comes into play: the artificial speed with which the educational process is imposed upon us. From childhood, we are expected to steadfastly follow a predetermined path: elementary school, high school, university, and then a job that we will perform for the rest of our lives. And all of this by the age of 23. In other words, the system assumes that at a young age, we must already determine our destiny, who we will be, what we will do, and how we will live. For Nietzsche, this is absurd. A true cultured individual requires time. Their development is not a short-distance sprint, but a marathon. They cannot be fully formed in just a few years. They would not even consider themselves complete in matters of high culture before the age of 30. A person at 30 is barely a diligent student, standing at the threshold of knowledge. At this point, though their voices sound different, Nietzsche and Schopenhauer merge into a single chorus. Both assert that the formation of an individual is a lifelong endeavor, a feat too great for a soulless system. They are united in the conviction: do not expect the system to create you. Your education is in your hands. Nietzsche bitterly remarked that state schools are teeming with stamp-out teachers, and the entire system has turned into a disgraceful farce. Perhaps there are tricksters ready to justify this charade, he sarcastically added, but their arguments are unlikely to withstand the test of conscience. To conclude this thought, one cannot help but recall John Taylor Gatto, a teacher of the year in Chicago and the state of Illinois. Disillusioned with the modern school system, he abandoned his career and dedicated himself to exposing the structural flaws of compulsory education. In his famous work, Dumbing Us Down, the hidden curriculum of compulsory schooling, Gatto draws a startling parallel between what we hypocritically call education today and what it truly ought to be. He writes, "True education, whatever its form, should forge you not into a faceless conformist, but a unique individual. It is obligated to awaken in you a spirit of innovation, so you can bravely face any challenges. It should help you acquire the values that will be your life's compass, make you a spiritually rich person who passionately loves their work. And most importantly, it should teach you two things of paramount importance: how to live and how to die. Such education, alas, cannot be offered by soulless factories, modern schools, or standardized systems. This is education that does not turn people into interchangeable cogs in a vast machine, but cultivates thoughtful, purposeful, and profound individuals. This education tolerates no haste. It does not force conformity or drill obedience. And while the system stubbornly strives for the opposite, perhaps the final lesson presented by Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, and Gatto is this: if you genuinely seek true education, you will have to be disobedient.